Can a Formula One team sabotage its own driver and get away with it? McLaren has been accused of something that could change the perception of the entire paddock. Isolating Oscar Piastri from vital information just before the most important weekend of the season. Why did they do it? And what implications does this have in the fight for the championship? Stay, because this story has more layers than you imagine. To understand why McLaren's decisions generated a storm inside and outside the paddock, we must first look at the most critical moment of the season, the 2025 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. It is the last event on the calendar which defines key positions in the championship, both at the drivers' and constructors' level. Every minute on the court counts. Every piece of data collected can mean the difference between winning and losing. And right there, in that scenario, Oscar Piastri was removed from free practice session 1, the well-known FP1. The official reason was compliance with an FIA regulation that forces all teams to field rookie drivers, that is, with little or no experience in F1 during 2 free practice sessions per season. McLaren, like everyone else, had to do it. But the problem was not what, but when and with whom. Lando Norris had already met this requirement on 2 previous occasions, Austria and Mexico. On the other hand, Piastri had only given up his seat once at Monza. Therefore, the team had no legal option but to replace him with a rookie in one remaining race. Until then, everything seems part of the protocol. However, strategic decisions also have moral, not just regulatory, weight. And that is where the controversy begins to boil. McLaren chose Abu Dhabi for the last race of the championship so that Pato O'Ward, its development driver and prominent figure in IndyCar, would take the wheel of the MCL 39 that Piastri normally drives. That session, only 60 minutes, may seem trivial to some, but it represents one of the most valuable spaces of the weekend. It's not just about going around, it is about validating simulations, adjusting the car setup, detecting anomalies in the configuration, and, most importantly, adapting to the behavior of the car under real conditions at the Yas Marina circuit, which is particularly technical and demanding in terms of traction and tire temperature. And while Norris was riding normally, gaining experience and providing key feedback to his engineers, Piastri was in the box, watching, depending on the data of another driver who, furthermore, does not share his driving style or his way of interpreting the dynamics of the car. O'Ward is fast, yes. He has talent, without a doubt. But it's not Oscar Piastri, and that makes the difference. A driver's preferences are honed throughout the season. They are the result of hundreds of hours of joint work with engineers, meticulous tests, and millimetric adjustments. Putting another driver in his place in a key session breaks that connection. The decision not only affected the car's technical performance, but also Piastri's psychological confidence. He knew that he was starting the weekend with a tangible disadvantage compared to his teammate. That while Lando had an hour advantage to read the track and adapt, he would start FP2 without any support of his own, having to guess behaviors that in F1 should be anticipated with telemetry, not with instinct. And yet, the most serious thing was yet to come. Because what McLaren did after this session made it clear that this was not just a collateral consequence of the FIA regulations. It was, according to some, a choice that directly affected the team's internal sporting equity. Because instead of sharing Norris's car information with Piastri to compensate for the loss, the team decided to erect a data barrier between the 2 garages. At that moment, the line between strategy and sabotage began to completely blur. What happened after FP1 in Abu Dhabi is what has made this case explode beyond the paddock. If until that moment McLaren's decision could be justified under the logic of the FIA regulations, what came next broke every framework of sporting neutrality. Because in a completely unusual decision, some would say unheard of, the team chose to implement a total separation of data between the garages of Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris. This barrier, which prevented both pilots from accessing each other's technical feedback, telemetry and configuration, was explained by the team as an experimental parallel development protocol focused on avoiding cross-influences to preserve the individual work of each pilot. An elegant narrative that does not convince everyone, because the context changes everything. This was not a preseason test. It wasn't just any Friday. It was the last race of a championship in which both McLaren drivers arrived in the middle of an internal fight for final position in the Drivers' World Championship. Norris with 16 points advantage, Piastri with the need to win, and the team decides to isolate them. And the key is understanding what it means to lose access to rival telemetry within your own team. In Formula One, data is more than numbers. They are maps, diagnoses, warnings, and answers. Knowing where your partner brakes, how he doses the ERS energy, what aerodynamic load he carries, with what pressure he presses the accelerator in each corner, are tools that allow you to adjust your car, simulate better laps, and gain confidence in each session. Piastri, being excluded from that information base by decision of his own team, was thrown into blind competition. The measure felt especially hurtful because it was not applied at any other time during the season. Not even in previous races where Norris had been the one to sacrifice a session for a rookie. In those cases, there was an exchange of data. But now, in the decisive race, there was no reciprocity. And that, in public reading, was perceived not as a technical measure, but as a deliberate choice to favor one and limit the other. Furthermore, it was not an emotionally neutral decision. Internally, McLaren has worked hard to prevent the favoritism narrative from resurfacing, especially after media pressure in previous years for trying to overprotect British drivers within its structure. This movement in Abu Dhabi revived those doubts. And it's not difficult to understand why. A local driver with more experience in the team with a margin of points in his favor, who maintains his full session, while the young foreigner still adapting is marginalized both on the track and in data. When McLaren decided to erect a data barrier between the two drivers just after sidelining Piastri from FP1, that action could no longer be seen as a neutral event. It was read as a logical sequence within a larger pattern of decisions that systematically favored a single pilot. The words stopped mattering. The facts spoke for themselves. And this is where the discussion changes. Because it is no longer about technical errors or debatable decisions. It's about intentions, of purpose. Whether McLaren, in its eagerness to ensure a certain result, has begun to compromise its internal impartiality. And that, in a sport where the margin between glory and defeat can depend on tenths, is a very serious accusation. The question that arises then is this: was McLaren strategic or disloyal? And the answer is not simple. Because from a strictly legal point of view, the team has not broken any rules. There are no regulations that require sharing data between pilots. There is no penalty for internal tactical decisions. But that doesn't mean the decision isn't unfair. In a team sport like Formula 1, the principle of equal conditions between garage mates is sacred. If one of them is systematically disadvantaged, the conflict is not technical, it is moral. And we're not just talking about immediate consequences. These kinds of decisions affect the relationship of trust between driver and team, especially when it comes to a young talent like Oscar Piastri, considered one of the most promising gems of his generation. Pilots of that caliber do not stay in places where they feel they are used but not valued, and other teams know it. Ferrari, Mercedes, Aston Martin, they are all attentive to the internal cracks of their rivals. And at McLaren there is now a very visible crack. Even if you want to believe that this was all a set of bad coincidences, the damage has already been done. Public perception is as powerful as reality. And in the current narrative, McLaren appears not as a strategically divided team, but as a politically divided team with one driver favored for his history with the team and another condemned for his recent arrival. Time will tell if this was part of a broader strategy or if we are facing the beginning of a silent break within the 2024 champion team. But one thing is already certain: doubt is sown. And in Formula 1, where confidence is everything, hesitancy can be as lethal as losing speed. When decisions of this magnitude are made in Formula 1, their effects are rarely limited to the immediate event. Oscar Piastri's isolation during the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix not only influenced the outcome of that race. What happened there altered internal dynamics, sparked media questions, and quite possibly changed the emotional and professional trajectory of a driver who was fighting to establish himself at the close of a season that already had a name and surname: McLaren. In strictly competitive terms, the damage to Piastri was immediate and evident. Being left out of FP1 and without access to Norris's data, he started his preparation with a technical void that simply cannot be compensated with simulations. Modern Formula 1 depends on millimeter optimization. Every degree of tire temperature, every slight difference in downforce, or every small detail in the ERS delivery curve can mean losing 2 or 3 tenths per lap. And on a circuit like Yas Marina, where the margins are incredibly tight and the overtaking area is limited, starting from the back and understanding the car is equivalent to carrying an invisible burden. But the real impact goes beyond the times. It seeps into the team environment, into the relationship between the drivers, and into the public narrative surrounding the team. The team that only a year ago had regained its credibility with a constructor's title was now under scrutiny not for losing performance, but for gaining internal conflicts. The international media were quick to point it out. Analysts, former drivers, and paddock figures began to question the logic of this strategy. McLaren's argument that separating information was part of an independent development plan to maximize individual potential was quickly dismantled. Because if they really wanted to boost their two drivers separately, why do it just when one of them was already at an objective disadvantage due to losing time on the track? Why not apply that policy on equal terms throughout the season? Do you think McLaren was strategic or disloyal? Would you have made the same decision if you had to choose between protecting your star driver or giving absolute equality of opportunity? What consequences do you think this may have on the relationship between Piastri and the team? Leave your analysis in the comments what you think about all this.